So I'm Jen Crichton. I am a journalist, an editor, a presenter, and I am, as of June last year, the founder of The Flock. So I've been in journalism for 18 years. I started out in Scotland working primarily in news broadcasting. I worked for STV, BBC, commercial radio. And then 12 years ago, I think, I moved to Dubai, where I discovered that news is being a government spokesperson. So I segued into magazines. And since then, I have edited 4 magazines. I have worked for some big titles as a freelancer: Harper's Bazaar, Cosmopolitan, Grazia. I've worked for all the major newspapers. And I have founded 3 titles on behalf of other people until last year, when I founded The Flock for myself. And that's not moved. There we go. Oh, helpful. So The Flock launched in June 2020 with a website, social media, 2 newsletters, it's now 1, and no ads, which is kind of critical to what I have been trying to do. And here is the reason. Our current advertising-based model in the media is failing. This is media share for 2021. As you can see, TV still reasonably healthy at 18%, primarily because broadcasters were still a growth state throughout lockdowns. Radio is down dramatically, and newspapers and magazines combined now account for just 7% of advertising spend in the UK. 69% pure play internet, that is anything relating to purely online media. So whether it's advertising and gaming, social media, it covers the full gamut of online, and it is growing at an exponential rate. The yellow is going to take over even more by the time we get into 2022. What that resulted in for the press, print media, traditional media, is more than 2,500 jobs lost since the start of the pandemic, 265 plus titles lost since 2006 in the UK. The reality of that is decreased staffing, lower quality output, and falling representation. What does that mean in reality? I have worked on magazines that have had literally 1.5 people accounting for them. I have friends who are working on major national titles whose teams have quartered. At the same time, print teams are being asked to also cover online, so their workload has doubled in some instances. There's no question that that results in lower quality output. And if you ask the advertising industry why advertising investment in print is falling so dramatically, they would tell you it's because of lower quality. The print media in the UK has been very slow off the mark to actually adopt digital in any meaningful, profitable, useful way. And the reality has been, in many cases, a kind of clickbait race to the bottom, and an increased blurring of the lines between advertising and editorial that a lot of the time, not always, benefits big businesses with big budgets. I put falling representation in there as well because it is critical to the media. At the start of lockdown, budgets were pulled in dramatically, and we know that for as much as the media makes a lot of noise at the moment about being diverse and representative, it remains a predominantly white, private school educated male profession at the top echelons. Women and those from minority backgrounds are far more likely to be freelance and are there far more likely to have been forced out of the industry during lockdown. Those 2,500 jobs lost accounts only for staff jobs. It doesn't account for freelancing. And to give an idea of budget cuts, a national newspaper who had previously paid me £300 for an article 2 weeks into lockdown offered me £50 for the same word count. That's the sort of reduction in budgets we were looking at during lockdown. So there are thousands more freelancers have been forced out of the industry. So that's the state of the media that we're looking at just now. And it does sound very doom and gloom, but it also means that there are opportunities, particularly for small businesses. So the first thing we need to do when we're considering what opportunities there might be to benefit us is to actually understand the media. Now, a lot of people will say that they understand what advertising and editorial is. It seems like it's pretty clear. Where it becomes less obvious is with sponsored content. And what sponsored content is trying to do is create editorial feeling content that is paid for by a brand. So it's also known as native advertising, advertorial. It's that crossover. And spotting where that crossover is can be critical if you have a brand that is looking to gain space. What it has meant in the past has often been that editorial has been driven by advertisers. So if you pick up a copy of Vogue, the advertisers who have the biggest spend, who have space in the front of the title, will also be the companies that are featured in editorial spreads. So in your fashion pages, in your shopping pages, it will be their products that feature there. As the number of advertisers in titles has fallen, that leaves a gap, that leaves an opportunity gap for brands that don't have budget to advertise, but are ready to act. And we'll get into how to be ready to act a bit later on. I picked up this week's Grazia as an example of this, and this has got the gift guide in it. Now, traditionally, a title like this, when we're going into a Christmas edition, I would expect to have around 30% advertising in it. This one has less than 15. And that means that when we're looking at pages like this, the gift guide, there is grossly more non-advertising brands in it than there are advertising brands. That's very, very rare. And that is an indicator of the state of play in the media right now. It's also great news for small businesses that are trying to get a handle on the media. Next, who are your target customers and where can you find them? What do they read? Again, sounds incredibly obvious, but it actually isn't. I think people still to this day have heritage publications that they believe are going to be the most useful to them, that they believe are where they want to be. And actually, a lot of the time, they're not necessarily the titles that you want. You need to think very clearly about who your target audience is and where they can be found. In Scotland, for a long time, there's been this idea that if you got into the Scotsman or the Herald, you've made it. But actually nowadays, their readership is low, it's aging, it's not necessarily the audience that you want. It might have cachet, but it doesn't actually serve a lot of small businesses who are trying to target a different audience. So it's really, really important that before you embark on any sort of media campaign, any kind of attempt to gain coverage, that you think really hard about who your audience is and where they can be found. And often that means looking at smaller publications, digital only publications or print, but smaller publications that have a more concerted focus, I would say, on the areas that you want to target, that perhaps have better engagement with their readers than the big national flagship publications, and that are not stacked so full of advertising that you lose any benefits from being involved. I'm thinking of magazines that have those huge directories at the back of them. I don't know how often you see businesses saying as featured in Vogue, and so often it means that they've bought a space in that directory at the back where there's thousands of businesses that just get lost. We want to get beyond that. We want to actually reach our customers, and that means having a bit more thought, not to the size of a publication, but to its relevance to us. What are you hoping to achieve from media coverage? Again, it sounds incredibly obvious, but it is amazing how many people approach journalists or PRs or marketing agencies and say, I want media coverage. And you say, okay, what are you hoping to achieve? And that is it. That's the end goal. But being in the media is not in itself an end goal. We don't need the media. There are businesses that can get by without the media. And there are businesses for whom the media won't necessarily benefit them at their stage of growth. So what is it that you're hoping to achieve? Are you looking to boost sales? Are you looking to boost your reputation? Are you looking to establish yourself as a market leader or individually yourself as an expert? What is it that you're wanting to do? Because that impacts on how you approach and who you approach quite dramatically. So the very, very, very first thing you need to do is to think about why you want coverage, what you are hoping to achieve, what success is going to look like from coverage for you. Do you have budget? This is more complex than it sounds, in the sense that I am not just talking about advertising budget. Advertising budget can be helpful, and we'll get on to how to make it work for you if you have it. But I would argue quite strongly that there is very little benefit in spending budget on advertising before you have the resources to make the most of it. And in that sense, I mean that you have to have your brand on point. You have to have the correct photography. You have to have the correct messaging. Without all of those things, ad buys are not going to be useful. So some of those things are going to take budget. Perhaps you will need help coming up with a brand. Perhaps it's just to get the correct photography, and we'll get on to what the correct photography is as well. It's about making sure that the budget you have, especially as a small business where budgets are often tight or non-existent, that you're using it the best you can to give yourself the best chance of getting some media coverage out of it. This is the question that I know the people who completed the survey all said that they wanted answered. How do I use social media to gain coverage? I am not a social media expert. I'll put that out there right now. It wasn't covered when I was at uni. It wasn't a thing. I am very much learning as I go, like everybody else is. And some days it is an absolutely frustrating hellscape out there. But where I would say social media helps is it is not in and of itself going to gain you media coverage. And I think we need to remember that social media and traditional media are very different beasts. But some of what we are going to discuss in terms of routes into the media, it definitely helps to have a profile. And that is where social media is your friend. If you are going to a journalist that you don't know, if you are pitching to them, whether it's through a press release, we'll get onto it later, whether it's through a press release, a story, you're pitching yourself as an expert, having a following, which is a term I hate, but having a following gives you a level of kudos, a level of respectability that for a journalist who's fielding lots of inquiries every day that they want to see. It says to them, okay, this person has engaged people already. There are people who are interested in what this person has to say. And in that sense, social media definitely helps when it comes to getting media coverage. And it is definitely worth putting the time into building a social media following if you have any intention of presenting yourself as an expert in your field, or if you're looking to sell product. But it is not the be all and end all for all businesses. And I think we would do well to remember that the two things can be quite separate. You're not necessarily going to go viral on social media and make headlines. That happens to very, very few people, and it shouldn't be our key focus when we're trying to seek out media attention. So 3 key ways in if you're not looking to spend money to get into the media. Become an expert. Doesn't sound very easy, but from what all of you were saying in your introductions there are numerous opportunities for people who are in this room to become experts in their field. And there are so many of you who are working in fields where the media is currently looking for experts. Claire, who was talking about working in the field of dementia, that's obviously something that is a huge news story at the moment, how we deal with our elderly, how we care for people. If you can become an expert in that field, it is not directly advertising your business, but it is a way in which you can talk about what you are doing in the media and gain coverage. So that ability to become an expert in your field is allowing you to create a more all-round brand to say to people that you and your company are someone that can be trusted in your field. So that's what I mean by become an expert. And there are so many ways in which you can do that. Social media following is good, but there are also both STV and the BBC run various programs to find people who will be regular contributors. STV recently has been running a series of workshops for people who want to become sort of spokespeople in their industry. They're providing training, particularly to those from quote unquote non-traditional backgrounds. The BBC has its expert women panel. It has expert panels for science, for tech, for all sorts of areas. So it's very much worth looking into the opportunities to take media training from those, to make contacts, particularly in the broadcast field, that will allow you to become seen as an expert in your field and gain organic media coverage that you don't have to pay for. Write it yourself. As I was saying at the beginning, the shortage of staff in the media is acute. The shortage of budget is acute. And that means that there are more pages to fill with fewer bodies and fewer resources. And that is a massive opportunity gap for small businesses. Can you write yourself? If not, can someone within your organization write? Do you know someone who is a copywriter or a journalist or in marketing that you can throw £100 at to help you out? You don't need to spend a huge amount of money on PR and marketing if you can create something yourself. Pitch it to journalists. We're all under-resourced at the moment. I will always look at a pitch from somebody who has something to say and an expertise that I don't have. So there are countless stories on that list. We can discuss individual opportunities later. But if you can pitch a story to a journalist that will resonate with their readers, you will get it published. And particularly if you are pitching in, not looking to be paid for that, but looking to promote your business, it's an organic way to do so. Make sure that you ask them for hyperlinks. You offer to write for free on that basis. And we will get into how we actually pitch those publications as well. I can send all of you afterwards a pitching guide and a press release guide that's got the basic do's and don'ts for that. But if you pitch a publication that has the correct readers for your product or your business, and you're writing that story as an expert, that is going to go a long way to establishing you as an expert as well, taking us back to point A. It provides material for publications that are struggling for it, and you get free coverage. It's a win-win-win-win-win for everybody along the line, and it's fairly easy to achieve if you do your due diligence and you approach the correct people in the correct way. Lastly, be ready to act. By that, I mean, when we're looking at things like this Grazia gift guide, having the photography in place. If you have small budgets and you're a product-based business, photography is where your budget goes. Cutout imagery is a godsend. That is what is going to be needed for all print publications. And there are so many opportunities every year to get in there. You've got your Christmas gift guides. If you've got a business that is dealing with knitwear like Jenny, it's all of your winter fashion pages. Grazia has a shopping guide at the front. It has fashion pages in the middle. This one has gift guide. It has beauty. There are fitness pages. There are home pages. If you have a business working in any of those fields, you have an opportunity to be there to fill that gap, because I can assure you there will always be an advertiser who pulls out, and there will always be a gap on that page at the last minute. And that gap is going to go to the person who is in the journalist's inbox with the correct imagery there ready to download. So you want to have cutout imagery. That more than anything is your key for print. For online, you want lifestyle imagery. You don't have to spend a fortune, just have a few key products photographed, ready to go. Send them as web-sized images within attachments. Don't send a WeTransfer that's going to expire. They will not take the time to get back to you. Send them as attachments, have them ready to go with your brand information in the email, so that a journalist who is on deadline, who has a space to fill, can grab that image and they're ready to go. That is going to be the easiest, quickest win for you if you have a product-based business. Oh, I love when it does that. Helpful. So as an example of what I'm talking about here, these are two recent pieces of media coverage that I got for the Flock. So over here on the left, you'll see I was in a magazine called FIP, which is a title that perhaps a lot of you won't have heard of. It is a largely subscription title for people within the media, and it covers big businesses in the media and small ones who are trying to take a different approach. It is a very niche industry title, but it got me quite a number of useful contacts, a good few new subscribers. That's what I mean when I talk about finding your audience. What I am trying to do with the flock is look at new funding models for the media and new ways of doing it. And that is something that is of interest to people who are already working in the media and facing those falling budgets, falling staffing, falling resources. So by putting my story in front of them, I am getting in front of an audience who are interested in what I have to say, and I can get into the nitty gritty of my business in a way that nobody like the Scotsman or the Herald is ever going to be interested in. So that was a huge win for me. They did a full 1,500 word interview, numerous photos, links, promotions for subscription. That was a really big win for me. The other story that I had recently is on the right. I'm talking about getting divorced in my early 30s to mark the release of Adele's new album. Now, that came about because I know the BBC journalist who was in charge of that piece. So that is an example of where your contacts will pay off, and networking is always good. But that's what I mean when I talk about not necessarily being an expert, but if you have spoken about an issue and you are an established name in a particular field, journalists will call on you when they need a quote for a particular thing. Now, that story doesn't directly promote my business, but within the piece, it references me as having founded a feminist magazine after divorce in my 30s. It's not strictly the business story, but it links to the flock. And that story was on the BBC homepage for 4 days and then was brought back onto the BBC homepage a couple of weeks ago. So it's been viewed by literally hundreds of thousands of people at this point. Now, those are people who probably wouldn't have heard of the flock before and now have. So it's not a huge win in terms of gaining subscribers at this point, but it all builds brand recognition. And all of these things allow me to send links to people in the future and say, look at the coverage that we've gained. So it's all about building a bigger picture of your business that you can refer back to when you're trying to gain space in the media. So we're going to have a little breakout room, and I would like you all to consider, like those two examples I've just given you, what your business story is and what publications might be interested in that, and what your personal story might be and what publications might be interested in that, or where you could establish yourself as an expert. So that kind of brings us back to what I was just saying. So you want to be an expert, have professional headshots. If you're trying to pitch yourself into publications and you're looking for them to call on you for quotes, you need to have headshots ready so that if they want to include you, you're making their job easy. Ditto with products. Digital, lifestyle products, digital and print, both lifestyle and cutout. Cutout imagery and lifestyle imagery, make sure you have your price and your brand name in the file size, the file name, sorry, that's your keys there. And got a newsworthy story, write it yourself. Journalists are overstretched to the max at the moment. There are gaps to be filled. If you go to them with a compelling story that resonates with their readers, they will cover you. Often they will print what you are writing for them verbatim. You don't have to pitch it as an article. You can pitch it as an article. You could also do it as a press release. But if you put a story in front of them that has good quotes, it will be used at the moment with the state of the media. So when we're talking about a newsworthy story, it doesn't necessarily have to be news. It is a story that you have to tell that is relevant to their readers. Look at what is in the news at the moment. Think about themes. Think about where your work ties into that. So like I was saying earlier with Claire's work with dementia and the current news cycle, Claire can not only pitch herself as an expert in that field, but also can potentially have quotes within wider pieces about the care sector. When we're talking about the impact of lockdown on loneliness, people who are working in music therapy, they can be in that field. So it's about working out where the hooks are that you can tie your story onto, and make sure that you have quotes when you approach a publication. Make sure that you have imagery if it's relevant, particularly of yourself, if you're looking to pitch yourself as an expert. It's all about making the journalist job as easy as possible, not because we're all lazy, although we all have those days, but because we are very overstretched. So, common pitfalls: email the right person. Please don't send a blanket email to publications and get names wrong. Things like that will get you immediately binned. It happens all the time. I had a pitch today, just this morning before I came on, saying, would you pitch this? Would you have this for Cosmopolitan? Well, I don't know. I write for them. I'm not commissioning for them. Email the right person, get their name right. Go online and Google. Any of the newspapers, any of the magazines will have an email format, same as any other company, and find the person that you need to be pitching to, your section editor, whether it's the health editor, whether it's the tech editor, whether it's the features editor, whether it's the fashion editor. Find the correct staff, address them directly, personalize each of your pitches to make sure that you are giving it your best shot. Consider the format. Like I was saying with photographs, print and digital have different needs. Consider it and try to meet them. I'll include some of that in the handouts afterwards as well about how you can best do that, but there are some very simple ways that you can do that. And just consider the tone of the publication that you're aiming for as well. You're pitching in a very different way to the Telegraph than you would be to Stylist, for example. Be patient. Sometimes it's about the long game. If you provide publications with product imagery, I would not be expecting them to use it immediately. Always put in the email, feel free to download this, feel free to keep this on record. They will always have gaps to fill. You want to be in their inbox ready and waiting and playing the long game. Think outside the box, just in terms of the publications that you're approaching. Sometimes your best return will be on fairly niche publications that have a very highly engaged audience. Look at things like subscriptions. A free news site might have huge amounts of hits, but a site that is subscription only will have much smaller numbers, but those numbers, people are paying to be there. They're highly engaged with the product that they're reading. So consider who you're pitching to, who their audience is, and how engaged that audience is. Look for expert opportunities. BBC, STV, all of those people will give you training in how to do that. But you can also look for them yourself. It's looking for that news hook and considering who's going to be covering it, looking for the guides that you can feature in. It's just about seeing the opportunities, understanding what titles are looking for. And consider your network. The BBC story that I got was from a journalist that I know. Most stories work that way. We all get pitches all day, every day, but all of those journalists who are pitching us are drawing from their own networks as well. Make friends with journalists, but make friends with other people in your area of expertise as well. Work collaboratively. As I was saying before, think of trends, think of areas that you can work together to put a message together. Try and think of how you can best represent your industry collectively and what you bring to the table for journalists. Sort of a group of people who are working in similar fields is a brilliant sell. It says to a journalist, well, they've thought about this, they are aware of an issue, that there is, if there's more than one person in a story, then it means that there is more than one person affected by a story. So it's just about trying to add a bit of weight and a bit of variety to your offering and making sure that you're saying to a journalist that this is relevant and that it affects more than just yourself. And lastly, someone had asked when we were in the breakout rooms as well about the crossover between advertising and editorial. I've not gone into advertising today. I'm happy to speak to anybody individually who's considering advertising, who has budget and wants to look at where to put it. But what I would say is that at the moment, as things stand, if you have advertising budget, there is freedom for you to really push it. Never take the first price you're offered. I'm doing my own industry out of a service here, but always push the prices down. Nobody is paying rack rate right now, and make sure that you're getting editorial support in return. The example I was using during the breakout was that this is one of the most expensive adverts in the title, inside front cover, that's gone to Chanel. If you go to the beauty spread later on in the magazine, 3 whole pages of that beauty spread are led by Chanel Beauty. That's editorial, not advert coverage, but you bet that that was included in their advertising deal, that they were getting that editorial support. Do not buy advertising at the moment unless you're getting editorial support in exchange. Get it written in, know what you're getting, make use of it. Make your money go as far as it possibly can. If you can get that editorial support in a different edition to the one you're advertising in, even better, spread it. Your money at the moment can work for you because the media is short on it. So make it work. And if anyone's got any questions about how to do that, I'm more than happy to help.